On a blue-lit Thursday night in Tribeca, Aria Navarro stepped onto a Gulfstream G650 for a 2-hour hop to Miami and woke up inside a rumor. By morning, a grainy shot of her hair in the cabin window, silvered by runway lights at Teterboro, was everywhere. Her ex-husband had spent the week boasting over martinis that his new fiancée was a real catch. But men who narrate their futures rarely expect their past to board a billionaire's jet. Aria never chased spectacle. Still, spectacle had found her. In the next 8 days, ambition would collide with forgiveness, and a private flight would force very public choices. Aria Navarro had learned to keep her bags light. A slim carry-on with graphite pencils, a linen blazer, a black notebook swollen with taped corners, color studies, wall elevations, budgets. She made her living persuading people to place beauty where spreadsheets said only square footage mattered. Office lobbies, penthouse corridors, academic atriums, places that swallowed footsteps and names, became gentler when she finished. That evening she was returning from a site visit near the Hudson when her phone chimed with a number she didn't recognize. "Ms. Navarro," the voice said, bright and steady. "Peter from Aldridge. Mr. Aldridge was impressed with your proposal for the wellness wing. He's wheels up to Miami tonight to meet the board. He's asked if you'd join to refine the pitch." Aldridge, as in Maxim Aldridge, the quizzical-eyed founder of a climate analytics firm that devoured data and spat out contracts from Singapore to Stuttgart. The Aldridge Foundation had pledged a 3-year grant to retrofit community clinics with art and sensory spaces. Aria had pitched one pilot room, and now someone was inviting her onto the plane. Tonight? G650 leaves Teterboro in 90. We can car you from Tribeca. Her landlord's fluorescent hallway flickered as she grabbed her go-bag. She texted her best friend, Jules Park, editorial photographer, guardian of her worst impulses. "Consulting to Miami. Back tomorrow. Rain check martinis." Jules responded with 8 martini emojis and 2 flame icons. The car hummed up the West Side Highway, slicing through the city's slow amber. At Teterboro, a gust kicked the hem of Aria's coat as she crossed the tarmac toward the jet. The Gulfstream's nose gleamed like a question mark. Inside, a flight attendant with a ballerina's poise offered tea and the softest blanket Aria had ever touched. Maxim Aldridge stood from a low cream sofa, taller than the article suggested, less choreographed. "Thanks for coming," he said, extending a hand. Not over-eager, not distracted, present. His hair was the color of 5 o'clock. He wore an open-collar shirt and the kind of watch that could buy a studio apartment in Soho. But somehow the watch looked embarrassed to be rich. "We'll only take a slice of your night," he added. "I read your line about the tenderness of thresholds. That stuck." "It's where people decide to enter," Aria said, "where fear leans forward." He nodded, took a seat. The cabin smelled faintly of cedar and fresh pages. As the jet taxied, Aria opened her notebook and sketched a rectangle of light. Maxim watched the pencil move, not appraising, more like listening. Conversation slid easily, the clinic corridor's harsh LEDs replaced with diffused panels, the noise signature of rolling carts, acoustic paneling in warm fiber, the budget constraint that kept trying to flatten color into compliance. By the time they leveled off, they had disguised the budget in a sequence of small mercies. She pulled out a color card: salt, cantaloupe, rain. He smiled at rain. "My sister used to paint with that exact grey," he said. "She said it was the color the city wore when it remembered it was an island." "You said used to?" A breath. "She died. Long time ago. I still hear her when I see certain blues." Grief had its own gravity, one Aria recognized. She angled the sketch so the cabin light made it honest. "Then we'll use the grey like a bridge, not a ceiling." They worked until the captain announced descent, and with it came the second, quieter conversation that shifts strangers into some softer category. He asked how she'd found her way to the art world. "I grew up above a bodega near Columbia," she said. "We didn't have much wall space. My mom rotated flyers like they were museum exhibits. free poetry readings, church jumble sales. She taught me that curation is a form of attention. And your ex-husband? The question was neutral, almost clinical, but it still touched a live wire. Arya's mouth was a small, straight line. He preferred headlines to attention. When the jet rolled to a stop in Miami, a ground handler opened the cabin door. The night was lush and loud, palm fronds gossiping. On the far side of the chain-link fence, a man with a long lens lifted it like a periscope. Arya saw him, then looked away. They were no one, she thought, and anyway, the city was too busy to care. They were not no one. By the time she and Maxime stepped into a chauffeured SUV, someone somewhere had already uploaded an image. A woman with a dark wave of hair seating herself by a window, the cabin light making a halo of the curve. The caption guessed at names, then promoted itself into certainty. Jules texted at 1:22 a.m. "I love you, but did you just board a billionaire's plane?" Arya stared. "Work, board meeting, back tomorrow." "Then brace yourself," Jules typed, "because Manhattan is already awake." Back in New York, at a bar near the Carlyle, a man with a perfect tie tucked under his chin raised a martini. "To Sloane," he said, the olive catching a light. "She's a real catch." His friends grinned. To real catches. The man was Thomas Vale, Arya's ex. He had turned their divorce into a redemption story, then decorated that story with a fiancée. A publicist had arranged the lighting. The lighting had arranged Thomas's face into a series of bullet points. Sloane Whitaker, the fiancée, had turned tasteful into an ecosystem. Neutral linens, eucalyptus in shower steam, angel numbers on Instagram. Thomas adored being adjacent to glamour in a way Arya had never permitted him to be. The bartender handed over a small plate of almonds, and one of Thomas's friends nudged his shoulder. "Tommy, don't look now." Thomas looked. The bar's TV ran without sound, a chyron blazing beneath a photo taken at Teterboro barely 3 hours earlier. Billionaire Maxim Aldridge spotted with mystery woman aboard G650. Zoomed in, the mystery woman had Arya's cheekbone, Arya's way of tilting her head when she was deciding if a room deserved tenderness. Martinis, in silence, do a kind of surgery. "What is that?" Thomas asked, the syllables clipped. Sloane reached for his wrist, eyes big, ready. "It's nothing," she soothed. "She's probably consulting. She's Arya. You know how she gets around." She laughed lightly, as if they were all extras in a breezy side plot. But in Thomas's head, a glass falling in a kitchen became an omen. He had told everyone the ex-wife was fine and that he had upgraded his future. The word upgrade was mean, and he had picked it on purpose. He told himself he was only matching the drama of the narrative humming through the city. Still, the sight of Arya on a billionaire's plane pierced something that was not pride. It was the memory of walking through their apartment at midnight and finding her asleep on the floor, paint under her nails, a design taped like a prayer to the wall. He had loved that once, before he wanted a life that aired better. He swallowed, the gin turning metallic. "We should go," he said. Sloane smiled at the reflection of her lip gloss in the glass. "Yes," she agreed softly. "We should definitely go." By morning, the image had circled the island of Manhattan twice and was making for the mainland. The rumor grew a second head. Arya Navarro, formerly married to tech executive Thomas Vale, seen boarding Maxim Aldridge's G650 en route to Miami. Was this the city's newest power couple? Comments swarmed. Opinions arranged themselves into armies. And in the center of the whirl, Arya sat in a window seat over the Atlantic, unaware that a single frame had made everyone forget that work can sometimes just be work, and that thresholds, tender as they are, can be bridges or traps. The morning Arya's phone became a siren. She was back in New York by 8:40 a.m., the Gulf Stream angling down through a clean August sky into Teterboro. The SUV returned her to Tribeca, where her street smelled like coffee that didn't belong to her. She climbed the 4 flights. Jules was waiting, already cross-legged on the hallway runner, holding a bag of sesame bagels like a peace treaty. "You're trending," Jules said, standing, eyes bright with equal parts mischief and alarm. "I brought carbs and a terrible plan." Arya let her in. The apartment was simple, rough brick, 2 leafy plants refusing to die, a window that composed the city like a painting. She turned on the kettle and scrolled. There were screenshots of screens. There were texts from clients, half concerned, half intrigued. There was one from an unfamiliar number, from Sloane. "Hey girlie, wanted to check in case you're overwhelmed. Media can be so messy, sending light." Jules peered over her shoulder. "Light, huh?" The emoji of an apology with an escape clause. Arya muted the text, set the phone down. "I didn't do anything wrong," she said, testing the sentence for structural integrity. "You didn't," Jules confirmed, "but in this city not wrong still has to outrun so interesting." Thomas had always been skilled at outrunning. He'd grown up in Queens with a father who fixed radiators and a mother who worked nights at Mount Sinai. He believed in progress as if it were a religion that gave out gold stars. When Arya met him at a fundraiser for a downtown art school, he'd been all sharp questions and soft laughter, thrilled by the friction of her work against the world. They married quickly, convinced that promising each other the future would hurry it. In the second year, Thomas began talking about optics. He'd say, "Would it kill you to post more? People need to see you." Arya would answer, "People need to see the work. I am not a product." He'd counter with spreadsheets, lectures on leverage, musings on how philanthropy could be activated, if only Arya would consent to being seen as a story rather than a person. She could feel love moving away from them like a tide. The night everything fell down, he called her insistence on privacy small. She called his need to be applauded hungry. The words stuck like glass. They divorced with careful signatures and noisy friends. Now those friends were texting him because the photo on the jet had lowered something galvanic into his bloodstream. He and Sloane sat at his kitchen island, a clean, cool marble square like a decision. "It's already everywhere," Sloane said, gently stirring a bowl of oat yogurt while not eating it. "But we can handle it." "Handle what?" Thomas asked. "There's nothing to handle. She's—" He pushed air through his teeth. "She's just doing her job." "Of course," Sloane murmured. "And you've moved on. We've moved on. Remember." Her phone buzzed. She glanced barely. "For what it's worth, my contact at Gloss would love to put out a little note clarifying that you and Arya are on good terms, that you're thrilled for her, which we are." Thomas blinked. Gloss? The gossip blog? He wanted to say he was above it, but a part of him warmed to the idea of narrative management. "They're credible," Sloane said, with the smooth authority of someone who'd seen credibility bought and sold like candles. "And we can position the wedding story next month. 2 birds." He hated the phrase, "position the wedding," as if it were a vase on an end table, but he let the sentence massage him. Meanwhile, Jules sat Arya on the couch, covered her knees with a throw, and produced a legal pad. "Okay," Jules said, "we list the facts. You consulted on a foundation project. You flew there and back because time exists and you respect it. You didn't post. You didn't pose. You didn't do anything but work. Also, the jet had excellent light, so you did look unreasonably cinematic." Arya kept her eyes on the legal pad lines. "He asked about my ex." "Maxim?" Arya nodded. He asked gently, like he was looking for the edge of a page so he could turn it. Jules' smile turned a degree warmer. "That's rare. He lost his sister. He said certain blues speak her language. I think that's why he built the foundation, so the world could hold her in public, because grief is too big to carry alone." Jules's eyes softened. "You see the rooms inside people. That's why this photo is both opportunity and risk." She ticked items off. "Clients? I can call and preempt the gossip. Your mum? I'll field. Thomas? He'll pretend indifference, which we both know is his mother tongue." Thomas's friends were not indifferent. They were, in fact, excellent gossips with a lawyer's memory. "She looks great," one texted. "Damn," another said, the word serving as both noun and thesis statement. Over group chat, someone dropped a screenshot of Sloane's DM receipt to a known gossip columnist. Can run feel-good piece on exes supporting each other. LMK timing. It was intended, it turned out, for a different recipient, but the internet is a mirror maze, and even the clever trip. By midday, a new headline appeared. Ex-wife of tech exec Thomas Vale joins visionary Maxim Aldridge for Foundation flight. A subhead reminded readers that Vale was engaged to wellness entrepreneur Sloane Whitaker, a real catch, he'd said too many times for comfort. The article quoted an insider close to Whitaker, noting that everyone is happy and supportive. Carefully planted, carefully wrong. At 3 p.m, Aria's phone lit again, this time with Aldridge Foundation's number. Peter's voice was steady but edged. Ms. Navarro, Maxim wanted to apologize for the storm. He doesn't live in storms. He also asked if you'd consider a short trip to the Amalfi Coast for a site visit. The mayor's office in Atrani is considering leasing a former convent for a pilot center, and your presence would help. Aria's heart did a complicated thing then, a kick that felt like freedom and a break that felt like caution. When? Tomorrow night, short, 3 days, straightforward, I promise. Jules stared at her with a face that said, in all caps, do the wild, right thing. You can't hide because someone else made a bad collage of your life, Jules said. Go see the convent, listen for Rain Grey. Aria booked it, imagining the coast like a string of silver charms. Outside, somewhere uptown, Thomas slid his phone into his pocket and stared at a street that used to belong to him. He thought of Aria laughing the first time they'd walked across the 72nd Street crosswalk in spring, a burst of cherry blossoms blowing like confetti. He tried to press that memory into a smaller shape. And Sloane, ever positioned, ever smiling, messaged her contact at Gloss, thumbs moving with the confidence of someone placing furniture in a room she believed she owned. We can leak that she's joining the foundation long-term, she wrote, even if she's not. Sweet angle. Women supporting women. The contact wrote back with a heart. In the shadow of that digital heart, something colder moved. Sloane had once told Thomas that every narrative needed a muse and a villain. She had not yet considered that sometimes it was the same person, depending on the camera's angle. The morning flight to Naples was crowded with people whose shoes were better than Aria's. She wore the linen blazer again, the closest thing she had to armor, and cradled a copy of Elena Ferrante, as if books could be passports. The airplane's map traced the Atlantic as if it were a ribbon, unspooling. Maxim's team had booked her at an inn carved into the cliff above Atrani, a place where the lobby smelled like lemon peels and old hymns. A balcony framed the sea like a painting. When she stepped out, scooters sounded like bees. Maxim arrived in a navy polo and a pair of sunglasses that could have been too much, but weren't. You made it, he said. And for a strange moment the phrase felt larger than travel. They walked through the former convent's cool corridors, stone holding centuries of footfall. In the courtyard, cloister arches threw shadows that made geometry look like mercy. Aria touched a wall with 2 fingers, introducing herself to its history. A caretaker with a face like a folded map unlocked a wooden door into a chapel. The air smelled of beeswax and water. This could be a room for breathing, Aria said softly, glancing up at a fresco that had forgotten its angels but remembered their wings. It could, Maxim agreed, or a place where grief meets color and isn't asked to be polite. He told her about the Pilot, an art and sensory center for frontline workers and patients, a place to unspool. As he spoke, he didn't oversell. He didn't promise the moon. He promised silence where no one demanded it, light where it mattered, chairs that didn't punish spines. Like Aria, he had a gift for making practicalities feel like reverence. They spent hours in that soft space, measuring a kind of hope. She sketched and re-sketched an entry sequence, a staff locker, a small library of slim books, a listening bench. Maxim noticed the way her pencil paused, then committed. "You don't flirt with a line," he said. "You marry it." Arya laughed. "Lines scare me less than people." "Same," he said. "At least lines tell you where they intend to go." In the afternoon, they sat at a seaside trattoria where the tablecloth felt like a forgiving shirt. The waiter, rosy, triumphant, presented anchovies like a parade. Arya took a bite and closed her eyes. "This is a miracle." "Anchovies are simply honest," Maxim said. "That reads as miraculous in a dishonest world." She watched him watch the sea. He had the gaze of someone who never assumed ownership. That, along with grief's gravity, made Arya curious. "What did you want before you knew what was possible?" she asked. He smiled like the question had been waiting in his pocket. "When I was 16, we lost our apartment. My mother and I slept in the back of a beauty salon on 108 First. The woman who owned it, Mrs. Navarro, let us stay for 2 weeks, no questions. She gave me a broom and an envelope with $20. That felt like a destiny-sized kindness. I wanted to build something that allowed me to do that over and over, without needing anyone's permission." Arya blinked. "Mrs. Navarro?" He nodded. "I don't know her first name. It was a long time ago." Arya's throat tightened. "My mother ran a salon in Washington Heights when I was a kid. She was Rosario Navarro. She would have made you soup you didn't ask for and lectured you about moisturizer." He sat back, stunned into a crooked smile. "Then we already go way back." Something in Arya rearranged. The world occasionally folded its map until improbable points met. She imagined her mother's small hands stirring caldo and wished she could text across time. As the sun fell like a coin into the sea, they walked the cliff path. Maxim's shoulder occasionally brushed hers, not on purpose, but also not. They said little, which worked. When they reached a lookout, he touched the stone rail. "This photograph," he said, finally acknowledging the cyclone at their backs. "Did it hurt you?" "It complicated me," Arya said. "I keep my life stitched in quiet colors, but the city wants neon when it tells stories." "Then let me be plain," he said. "I'm not a neon man. The jet is a tool. The money is a lever. The pictures, noise. I wanted you on that plane because your work made me hear my sister. If you choose to join this project, it's because you believe in light, not because we need to perform being seen together." Arya had not realized how much she needed that sentence to exist. It made the rumor smaller. It made the convent hum with purpose again. "Then I'm in," she said. "With conditions, real chairs, real quiet, and the rain grey at the thresholds." He extended his hand, but instead of a shake they did the awkward half-hug of humans who respect the backstage. The next morning they toured a defunct ceramics studio that might become a workshop. The caretaker told stories with his arms. Arya drew a corner with a sink deep enough to forgive mess. They laughed over a word whose translation disagreed with itself. They were, without naming it, happy. Back in New York, Sloane posted a photo in an oatmeal sweater, latte art like a white leaf floating in a pond. The caption, "When women rise, we all rise. So proud of the strong women in my life choosing alignment. Sisterhood." It was implicitly about Arya without mentioning her name, the way a subtweet is a knife in a ribbon. Thomas stared at the post, then at his reflection in the refrigerator door. He didn't love the way his jaw clenched now in photos. He texted a friend, "Is it insane that this bugs me?" The friend texted back, "Only if you care about the truth more than the narrative. Which do you care about?" Thomas pocketed the phone, finally opening the door to a truth he'd stored in the crisper. He missed the version of himself who did not check angles before entering rooms. He missed Arya's laugh when the subway was late. He missed being someone's person without needing a press release. The Amalfi sky went darker. On the balcony of her inn, Arya called Jules on video. Jules answered with a clay mask on, scaring 2 pigeons and 1 neighbor. "Well, it's good," Arya said, feeling the words glow. "There's a thread from my mother I did not expect." "Maps folding," Jules said, clapping. Promise me one thing. What? Don't let the city decide who you are in your own story. Also, bring me back a lemon. Arya laughed, then said good night. Down below, surf shushed 1,000 mistakes. Up above, somewhere over the Atlantic, a rumor still circled, looking for a landing. When Arya returned to New York, the light had shifted. The city began wearing September. She stepped into her studio, a former garment factory with brick that held summer like a memory. On her drafting table lay an envelope with no return address. Inside, a photocopy of emails. The subject lines sang, Re, gloss opportunity. Re, softer angle, bolder reach. The contents were worse. Sloane Whitaker strategizing with a columnist about optimizing the story of Arya's connection with Maxim for an uplift narrative that would dovetail with Sloane's wellness launch. Between the emails, someone had scrawled in pencil, "She isn't your friend." A post-it attached was stamped with a tiny lemon. Jules. Arya breathed in, then out. She did not love scandal, but she hated lies. She took photos of the pages, then slid the originals into a folder like specimens. At MoMA's sculpture garden that afternoon, she met a client, a pediatric oncology unit chief, who believed in color as a way to make corridors lie less about what happened inside them. Arya offered the rain grey for thresholds, showed a fabric that held both light and arms. "I saw an art room when I was 8, the doctor said, looking at nothing in particular. "I remember the smell of tempera more than the smell of chemo." They shook hands and meant it. Outside, at a cafe on 53rd, Jules waved a napkin like a flag. "We should talk strategy," she said, spreading out the printed emails like tarot. "Option A, burn it down. Option B, plant something and let it grow. Option C," Arya said, "tell the truth well once and then go back to work." Jules smirked. "You always did love a minimalist palette." "Also," Arya added, "I don't want to hurt Thomas." Jules cocked her head. "You don't owe him that." "I owe myself not to become the kind of person who confuses revenge with justice." "Saint Arya," Jules said, rolling her eyes affectionately. "Fine. Then we stage a single substantive interview with someone who actually cares about ideas. No gossip. Long form. We choose the frame." They chose a writer at a serious magazine Arya admired, the kind that still budgeted for adjectives. The pitch? A piece about the Aldridge pilot and the philosophy of thresholds in healthcare design. The writer, a woman with a laugh like a good chord, said yes so quickly it felt like an apology for 1,000 worse headlines. Meanwhile, Thomas met his friend Aaron at a bar with leather banquettes that whispered. Aaron had gone to law school, then to therapy, then to gentleness. "You're unhappy," Aaron said, in the voice of a person who refuses to speak in emojis. "I'm fine," Thomas said, towing the shore of a lie. "I'm getting married." "Getting married doesn't make you happy," Aaron said. "It makes you married." Thomas stared into his drink. "Sloane says we should control the story." Aaron shook his head. "You don't have a story. You have a life. Start there." Sloane, for her part, had never been more certain of anything. She had an instinct for angles, how to make harsh corners soft, how to turn a shadow into a filter. She believed that authentic meant professional lighting. When she discovered that her emails had not remained private, she clutched her phone like a child. Then she composed a post about the painful learning curve of public love and attached a photo of her holding Thomas's hand on a pier, the river making eloquent noises. Comments were concerned, supportive, envious, digital petals scattered at her feet. The magazine interview took place in Arya's studio, sunlight doing what money never could. The writer asked about the word tenderness. "People think tenderness is weak," Arya said. "But it's radical. It's the opposite of spectacle. It's attention without agenda." The writer asked about Maxim. Arya kept it plain. "He's a client who cares about the work. He lost someone. He wants to build places where loss can sit without scaring the room." "Are you involved?" the writer asked, and the wind shifted. "I'm involved with the project," Arya said. My personal life is a quiet neighborhood. The piece ran with photos of Aria's hands coaxing light across a sample of fiber. It quoted her on thresholds. It mentioned the jet in a single paragraph, then moved along, refusing to orbit the sun of spectacle. The city, startled by this lack of drama, blinked and, for a breath, behaved. Then the next twist arrived, as twists do, on a weekday wearing casual clothes. An email landed in Aria's inbox from an unknown address. If you knew what Sloane did, you would not be so generous. Attached, a folder of messages from Sloane, not just to gossip blogs, but to a black market narrative fixer that promised controlled virality. The fixer had proposed staging a candid of Thomas running into Aria in Central Park to produce a mature closure moment. In the margins, a price list that made ethics look like a coupon. Aria exhaled. She had given Sloane the benefit of several doubts. This stole more than story. It stole the chance for any of them to be people instead of characters. She forwarded the bundle to Jules with a simple line: "How do we make this matter without becoming it?" Jules responded with a link to the Aldridge Foundation's upcoming gala at MoMA. "Go," she wrote, "speak, not about her, about rooms that heal, steal the spotlight by turning it into daylight." At Teterboro again, on the way to a donor preview, Aria saw the same ground handler with the same careful hands. "You're that woman," he said quietly, not unkind. From the photo, "I am a person who stands near planes sometimes," she replied. He grinned, then tipped his cap. "We can rename ourselves daily," she thought. Maybe that's the work. The gala would be the city's mirror, everyone dressed as their favorite version of themselves. She would wear a black dress that let her disappear when she wanted and remain when she didn't. She would say the word tenderness again, knowing it would make certain men swallow hard. She would not say Sloane's name, or Thomas's, because a room can become better without naming every shadow. But rooms, of course, also hold surprises. MoMA in evening dress resembles a spaceship come to beg the future's forgiveness. The atrium held a modest forest of gowns and tuxedos, silk and satin and vows. Waiters navigated the forest with trays that smelled like lemon rind and lamb. Somewhere, a quartet made strings behave. The foundation's logo glowed tasteful white on tasteful grey. Aria stood with Maxim near a sculpture that looked like a question that had finally confessed to being an answer. He wore a suit that was almost comically precise, but the precision softened when he smiled. "We'll keep it about the pilot," he said, reviewing nothing. "Then we'll let the checkbooks do what they're good at." Peter, the assistant, flitted, the hummingbird of logistics. "You're after the video," he told Aria. 2 minutes, then a short appeal." 2 minutes, she repeated, as if time were a dance partner she could trust. The video began. Faces filled a wall, nurses and daughters, deli cashiers, a teacher who cried only when she saw a certain yellow. The voiceover refused to lie. Grief makes the body heavier. The right room can carry some of the weight. A shot of the Atrani courtyard, the rain grey at a threshold. Aria's sketch turned into a wall. The wall turned into a door. She stepped to the podium. The microphone tested her breath. "We talk about care as if it were a single verb," she began. "But care is a choreography. Light, sound, colour. The dignity of a chair that notices your spine. A threshold can either demand performance or allow arrival. We're building arrival." She told the story of a child who drew her pain as a storm and then, in the art room, drew the storm a door. "No one denied the storm," Aria said, "but we offered her a hinge." Applause rose, not like thunder, but like weather that means it. Eyes softened, hands adjusted their purpose. Maxim followed with plain figures, the cost of acoustic paneling, the price of a bench that forgives. Donors liked numbers, he treated them like neighbors, not gods. They were almost across the finish line of the evening when the gala did what galas do. It became a stage for someone else's scene. Thomas Vale stepped onto the low dais with the determined grace of a man who had rehearsed in his head. He wore a tuxedo that fit like a promise and a smile that did not. Sloane was beside him, luminous, camera-ready, a sheath of pale silk that made people memorize themselves. "Excuse me," Thomas said, taking the microphone that had not been offered. "I'm Thomas Vale. I'd like to share a personal pledge." Arya's stomach dropped. Maxim's jaw tightened almost invisibly. Thomas cleared his throat into a quiet that had been earned by other stories. "I'm committing a matching gift to this pilot, in honor of the work and the woman who believes in it." He angled his body toward Arya, the spotlight obedient. Sloane squeezed his hand, smile setting like concrete. "And I'm pledging my platform," she said, "to amplify this mission, women supporting women." The words were almost good, the choreography was not. The room's temperature shifted a degree colder. The quartet faltered, recovered. Arya walked to the edge of the dais. She took the microphone with the care of someone defusing a small bomb. "Thank you for your generosity," she said, voice even. "This project belongs to anyone who believes in rooms that heal. But it isn't a stage for closure or a prop for narrative control." A murmur, neither hostile nor friendly. Arya continued, newly steady. "If you want to honor the work, fund the bench that allows a nurse 5 quiet minutes. Fund the threshold that lets a grieving father step inside without being asked to perform gratitude. But don't use this space to fix a story you broke elsewhere." Silence, then something close to an exhale. Maxim watched her as if her spine had grown wings. Thomas stood very still, the pose of a man realizing that a certain kind of charm no longer purchased the same quiet. He nodded, eyes glassy, then lowered the mic. "You're right," he said, perhaps to her, perhaps to the room. He left the dais. Sloane lingered a half-second too long, then followed, a practiced smile cracking at the edge. Afterward, donors wandered to tall tables and studied figs they would never eat. People approached Arya in a steady stream to say thank you, with the gratefulness peculiar to the rich when someone returns a room to integrity. A woman with white hair and a diamond like a comet said, "My husband died in a room that did not notice him. I want to fund 3 thresholds." Arya squeezed her hand and meant it. At the far edge of the atrium, under a brancusi that looked like an exclamation the universe had made by accident, Thomas waited. Arya approached because she believed in not leaving doors half-closed. "I thought I was doing the right thing," he said squarely, "but I was performing the right thing." "You told people Sloane was a real catch," Arya said softly. "Did you want to catch her, or be caught by applause?" He didn't pretend not to understand. "Both," he admitted. "I wanted a life that photographed well. The camera made me hungry. I started measuring myself in angles." "We all get hungry," Arya said. "What matters is what we feed." He swallowed. "I'm sorry." The words were unadorned, unlit. "Not for the donation, that's good. For stealing your scenes. For making you into content." She nodded, and because forgiveness is not a trick but a craft, she offered him a small piece. "Learn to sit in a room that isn't looking at you," she said. "It will make you better." Sloane materialized, spine immaculate. "Thomas, there's press waiting." She addressed Arya with that weaponized warmth. "Lovely talk. I shared an Insta-carousel from the panel. You looked divine." Arya met her eyes. "Please stop emailing fixers to stage my life." Sloane's face didn't move, but her knuckles tightened around her clutch. "I don't know what you mean." "Of course you do," Arya said, not raising her voice. "But this isn't your room." She turned away before the argument could become choreography. Maxim found her near the exit, where the rain grey did its work. "You were a hinge," he murmured. "Was I too sharp?" "You were exact," he said. "Sharpness is a kindness when it cuts the right thing." They left together, not holding hands, which felt like its own kind of romance, the kind that trusts time to carry its share. Outside, the city had cooled. Parked along West 53rd, a car door opened. Peter jogged to catch up. "Board wants the pilot expanded statewide," he said, breathless with good news. Also, an anonymous donor just funded the listening benches. Anonymous? Arya asked, amused. Peter nodded, grin irresponsible, the best kind. In the rearview mirror of a town car 20 yards away, a man wiped at his eye and told his driver to take Broadway. Some fixes were quiet. Some needed to be. The morning after MoMA, the city woke up with opinions. Some thought Arya had dragged Thomas in public. Others believed she'd rescued a room from becoming a reality show. Most, as usual, forgot by lunch. Arya didn't. She returned to her studio and made lists like scaffolding. There were suppliers to confirm, paint to test, a deliverable calendar that looked like a skyline. Jules arrived with coffee and tabloid clippings. "You want the good news?" Jules asked. "Always. The pilot is funded, your inbox looks like Times Square, and the columnists have moved on to a chef's divorce which involves a labradoodle and a sourdough starter." "And the bad?" Jules sighed. "Sloane's team is dropping whispers. Nothing overt, just some people ride men's planes to get ahead, coded as girl talk. It's sticky." Arya stared at the drafts pinned to her wall, the way lines knew where they were going. "Then we do the work publicly," she said. "Open site days, volunteers, a live stream of the Atrani build-out. If spectacle demands a show, we'll show labor. Let the city watch paint dry." Maxim loved the plan. "Make process irresistible," he said on a call. "Yes, my comms team will hate how unshiny it is, which is exactly why we should do it." In the weeks that followed, Arya's studio became a hive. Carpenters argued with softness. A nurse from Queens brought her mother's empanadas and 3 opinions about benches. A teenager, shy behind chipped black nail polish, sketched a mural that made everyone reconsider geometry. Arya posted short videos of hands, sanding, stitching, turning screws. She narrated in a voice that could put a restless room to sleep. "This is how we build a threshold," she would say. "It takes longer than you think. It takes less magic than movies pretend. It takes attention." The live stream from Atrani showed volunteers carrying chairs across the courtyard with that particular gait of people doing something that matters. The fresco with missing angels watched, approving. One afternoon during a Q&A under a plywood arch, a reporter asked a question shaped like a trap. "What do you say to critics who claim your proximity to Maxim Aldridge is the only reason this pilot exists?" Arya smiled in the way that convinces microphones to behave. "I say proximity is irrelevant without purpose. People with resources call people with ideas every day. The part that matters is whether anyone listens." Maxim listened, then insisted on quiet where most people want noise. That's the partnership. Maxime, watching from New York, texted one word: exact. Thomas, meanwhile, took Aaron's advice and sat in rooms that weren't looking at him. He showed up at a community tech lab in the Bronx and taught kids how to debug, badly at first, then better. He didn't post. He didn't mention his fiancée. He evangelized tidy code and messy learning. One evening, a teenager named Maya told him, "You talk like a product manager, but you listen like my uncle." It was meant kindly, and he took it that way. Sloane did not enjoy sitting in rooms where she was not center. She watched her metrics dip when Arya's live streams went up and felt something sour erode her veneers. She told herself it wasn't jealousy. It was brand architecture. She scheduled a Women Who Frame panel and invited 3 influencers who had turned authentic into a subscription model. The panel's stage looked like a home whose coffee table never permitted feet. On stage, Sloane said, "We all support each other, right?" The audience clapped as if that were a question with a syllabus. Then a woman from the back asked, "Why did you hire a fixer to stage another woman's life?" A beat. Another. Sloane smiled, too many teeth. "I have no idea what you mean," she said. "But let's return to alignment." Alignment does not like to be misused. By evening, a leaked invoice from the fixer trended. The line items sang again. Central Park, run in. Soft light hero shot. Contract for quote approval, breach voids refund. The internet performed its moral certainty. Some commenters defended Sloane. We all curate. Others unfollowed with catechisms about integrity. Thomas read headlines like a penance, then called Sloane. We can't do this, he said quietly. Do what? She asked, voice buttered. Live in a story that needs villains, he said. I'm not marrying a brand. I'm trying to marry a person. Sloane exhaled, the sigh of a fortress. Thomas, she said, voice pitched for pity, you're naive. Maybe, he said, but I'd like to be again. They ended it over the phone because no room could have made that goodbye kind. Sloane posted a photo of the river and a caption about choosing what chooses you. The comments did their messy work. Aria heard about the split from Jules, who had a cousin at every magazine. She felt no triumph. Relief, perhaps, at the prospect of fewer rehearsed posts. Mostly she felt tired, the kind of tired that only sleep and sanding can fix. That night Maxime called from a quiet room. How are you? He asked, letting the question be an actual one. Hungry, Aria said. Exhausted, hopeful. There are worse triads. Come to Teterboro in the morning, he said. We'll fly down for a day to bless the thresholds, then back for the contractor calls. Bless, she teased. Is that in the budget? Always, he said, and she heard the smile. At dawn, the G650 looked less like a rumor and more like a tool again. Inside, they spoke sparingly, sentences ticking like instruments. At 50 minutes into the flight, Maxim said, I want to tell you something before the world does. He paused. My board wants me to announce a new role for you, creative director of the program, public-facing, not loud, but visible. Aria was quiet long enough that the air leaned in. I've avoided titles like that, she said. I know. I wouldn't ask if it were cosplay, he said. It's stewardship, authority, salary, and say-so. Say-so, she repeated, tasting it. Okay, if I can spend it on quiet things. Only. He held out his hand again. This time she took it and didn't let go until the coast unfurled under them like a promise the planet intended to keep. The pilot center opened in late October, rain grey set like a heartbeat at every entry. The first week, the rooms smelled like sawdust and lemon oil. People arrived and did not perform. A nurse took her 5 minutes on the listening bench and cried in a way that didn't apologize. A man in a sweater touched the paint as if it could forgive him for surviving. A teenager, with chipped nail polish, now hired part-time, trained volunteers with a voice that didn't waver. Aria walked the thresholds like a priest who believed in doors. She straightened a small print, adjusted a chair's tilt by 1 degree, and with those movements said, I see you, to people who hadn't been seen since they became embodiments of their grief. Maxime toured with quiet pride, introducing donors to corners like they were old friends. This is the corner that catches despair before it hits the floor, he'd say. People laughed, then often they cried. The program's website featured a simple line, We build rooms that remember you're a person. A week later, an email reached Aria from a woman named Esperanza. The subject, I think my mother knew you. The body, she ran a salon on 181st when I was 15. We slept there for 2 months. She never took the money you offered. She said, they'll need it later. I think you built her a room tonight. Aria printed the email and taped it to her wall. When Maxime saw it, he pressed his fingers to his mouth. Rosario, he said, the word a soft bell. The city, surprisingly, behaved. The story refused to be a scandal, so it settled into being an example. Gloss ran a grudging follow-up about unsexy heroism. Other foundations called to ask if they could steal the blueprint. Steal it, Aria said into phones. Steal it and don't credit me, just don't cheap out on the benches. Thomas sent a short message. I'm volunteering on Saturdays at the Bronx lab. It's good. Aria wrote back, it is. Sometimes redemption requires fewer adjectives. Sloane pivoted. She launched a podcast about resilience and booked guests who specialized in absolution. She remained photogenic and lonely, a combination the city understands too well. On a grey morning that felt exactly right, Maxim asked Arya to walk with him beneath the cloister arches. "I have 2 more requests," he said, voice careful. 1, chair the board. 2, dinner that isn't a meeting. Arya smiled at the sequence. "Yes to the first," she said. "As for the second, do we know how to eat without strategizing?" "We could learn," he said, "or we could strategize about how not to." They chose a trattoria with tripe on the menu and waiters who remembered your face better than your name. They talked about everything but work, movies they loved for reasons that embarrassed them, disasters inked on their CVs, the exact shade of blue that makes a room listen. When the bill came, Maxim didn't lunge. Arya didn't either. They shared it like people who recognized that money changes a table's gravity unless you keep anchoring the corners. After dinner, on the cliff path, they finally held hands without apologizing to time. It felt less like a beginning than an admission. "We are better when we face the same direction," Arya said. "We are better when we face the same thing," he corrected gently. "Direction is for headlines." They kissed, once, like a sentence with a period, no exclamation, grateful to belong to the gentlemanly silence of the Mediterranean night. Back in New York, Jules watched the live stream and clapped alone in her kitchen, scaring her cat. She texted a lemon emoji followed by a heart. "You did it," she wrote. "You built a door that learned people's names." Arya wrote back, "We did." Then, because the city likes to test its saints, a final twist arrived with timing so dramatic, Jules accused the universe of lazy screenwriting. A donor, one with a yacht, a watch and an allergy to humility, proposed a naming gift that would splash his surname across the Atrani courtyard. The offer was robust. The conditions were not. "He wants his logo on the fresco," Peter said, pale. "No," Arya said, and the room forgave her for not saying sorry first. "We'll name a broom closet after him if we must, or a mop. The fresco is a public sky. It doesn't belong to anyone." Maxim, to his lasting credit, didn't flinch. He called the donor himself. "Some things," he said into the receiver, "are not for sale." The donor huffed, invoked tax logic, withdrew. Other donors, hearing the story, gave more. Integrity, it seems, can be a revenue stream if you don't use that phrase out loud. That night, Arya stood alone in the chapel. The angel's absence felt like an intentional space. She whispered, "Gracias," to her mother, to Esperanza's mother, to the caretaker with the map face, to anyone whose quiet had kept this loud world from splitting. She walked out under the rain grey, which had now become a friend. Outside, Maxim waited, hands in pockets like a poem that didn't trust itself yet. "Ready?" he asked. "For what?" "For the next door," he said, and she understood. They took the G650 to nowhere in particular, a short circle over the coast for reasons that had nothing to do with being seen. The cockpit smelled like competence. The pilots nodded with their chins. Arya sat by the window, the same angle as the photo months before, and smiled at the ordinary miracle of a wing doing its job. "This time," Maxim said, "no one bothered to photograph us." "Because we're boring," Arya said, pleased. "Because we occupied the glare until it got tired," he countered. "You taught it patience, and it decided to leave." They talked through next steps. "Newark," she said, ticking items. "Detroit, Fresno, small hospitals with rooms that were never meant to hold sorrow. We build the thresholds and teach the rooms to remember names. We publish the designs open source." He nodded. "And I'll learn to eat without a board packet between my fork and my mouth." They landed, unheralded. In the car, Arya scrolled through photos she hadn't posted. A nurse's hands folded like a shell, a teenager's grin in the rectangle of a window, Maxim laughing at a lemon that refused to be peeled. She chose none. She put the phone down and looked out the window at a city that had stopped trying to narrate her. At Jules' studio that evening they toasted with something fizzy Jules promised wasn't Prosecco, but might as well have been. "To honest weather," Jules said. Thomas arrived late, carrying a box of donuts and a box of apologies. He looked better, which is to say, less polished. He talked about the Bronx kids with a pride that didn't seem to require witnesses. He told Aria quietly that he'd ended the engagement. He did not ask for anything. He asked her what books she was reading. Then he left, as men should when the story isn't theirs anymore. Later, on Aria's roof, the three of them lay on their backs and named constellations wrong. "That's the threshold," Jules said, pointing at Orion, "and that's the listening bench." Laughter scratched the sky like a tiny penknife. In the days that followed, Aria and Maxim got used to the choreography of partnership that isn't performance, leaving notes in the margins of each other's drafts, remembering to eat when the calendar didn't, holding space for grief that didn't belong to either of them but passed through the rooms they built. They learned each other's silences and did not attempt to pave them. At a small ceremony in Washington Heights, Aria unveiled a plaque in a clinic lobby. It read, "In honor of Rosario Navarro, who made space." Esperanza and her mother stood beside her, hands linked. Maxim stepped back into the second row and cried in a way that did not ask to be observed. The pilot's blueprint, posted for anyone to steal, began showing up in places Aria would never see. A church basement in Milwaukee, a school counselor's office in El Paso, a ferry terminal in Seattle, where a commuter sat and remembered how to breathe. Letters arrived with photos of rain-grey thresholds installed by hands she'd never shake. The color moved like a kindness, press-free. One evening, a message reached her from a nurse in Naples. "We used your listening bench for a family whose son didn't make it. They cried, then they slept. When they woke, they took a walk. The bench didn't cure anything. It made the thing curable. Time." Aria forwarded the message to Maxim with one line. "We are doing the work." He replied, "We are." On a late Sunday, they returned to Teterboro, no cameras, no lenses, and boarded the G650 for a hop to Boston to tour a clinic whose hallways apologized. As the jet taxied, Aria glanced out the window and saw the ground handler again. He tipped his cap. She waved, feeling the circle close. In the air, she rested her head on Maxim's shoulder. He traced a small rain-grey line on her palm with his finger, north to south. A threshold, even on skin. "Do you ever wish," he asked, "that we had met before the photo?" "No," she said. "We needed the photo to show us who we didn't want to be." He smiled. "Then to not being that." "To not being that," she repeated and closed her eyes. The plane climbed into honest weather, clear, then a little troubled, then clear again. Aria thought of every room that had ever made her feel more herself. She thought of doors that understood their job. She thought of her mother's salon, the tiny chairs where tired women became more like who they intended to be. She dragged her finger across the glass, leaving no mark. They were not a headline anymore. They were a hinge. They were, imperfectly, the good kind of noise, the scrape of a chair pulled close. The sigh of a room learning a name, the hush that falls when people lay down their armor and enter. Somewhere below, the city gossiped lazily about a chef and a labradoodle. Somewhere above, angels without faces minded their frescoes. In the middle, two people took a flight that did not change the world but made them ready, once they landed, to keep doing the work that might. If you've stayed with Aria to this last threshold, you've watched a woman rebuild the story of her life from the inside out, turning spectacle into service, rumor into rooms that heal. She didn't win by being louder, she won by being truer. That's the weather I wish for you. Honest skies, doors that learn your name, people who listen like rain. If this story moved you, even a little, do me a favor. Tap like so more people can find it. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that resilience is a craft, and subscribe for more real-life romantic fiction that leans toward hope without lying about the hard parts. Drop a comment with your favorite moment, or the shade of blue you'd paint a threshold. Until next time, keep choosing connection over performance, and remember, The best rooms we enter are the ones we build together.